Welcome to 28.5 Women's Basketball, where we explore a unique and authentic perspective on the women's game, break down upcoming matchups, and discuss the latest news and trends in women's basketball. We are your hosts. I'm Sydney Story, and I played basketball at the University of Tennessee under Pat Summitt.
And I'm Becca Goodman, and I played at the University of Notre Dame under Muffet McGraw. And we're thrilled to have you join us today. Before we jump in, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy what you hear, be sure to tune in each week and don't forget to follow, download, and listen to give an assist and share the love. Now let's get started with today's episode. Hey, Sid, how's it going?
Hey, Becca, going well. How are you?
I'm good. Another week of upsets, great games, and just overall news.
Absolutely. And crazy to think that we're about a month and a week away from March Madness. Unbelievable.
March Madness. Now that we can call it that, right? Now it's officially, the title is March Madness. You know, in college, I didn't see it as the women's college NCAA tournament. I didn't see it as that. I just saw March Madness because the men were called it, right? Like, I didn't think there was anything different. But apparently it had to be officially branded within the last year or so as March Madness for the women.
It is absolutely crazy. I didn't notice that either as a player. We just naturally called it March Madness. So also glad that it's officially branded and we can call it March Madness. It's about time.
Right? Yeah, almost March Madness time. But in the meantime, let's chat on a few other things here. We got 2 halves for you and then overtime. So our first half, we're going to do a 28.5 conference call where we're going to highlight one recent game from the SEC, Big Ten, and ACC. Then we're going to jump into our second half called Rank and File. We're going to talk through the AP poll shakeup and player of the year races and just some overall facts and nuggets of different teams within the ranks. And then in our last part, we're just going to jump into our quick overtime, talk about some Unrivaled updates and some games. It's that tournament and league is in full go. So we have some good stuff to talk about there and some updates as well. So let's get rolling.
Let's do it. So that first half, let's jump right in. 28.5 conference call. So let's go around the horn here. We're going to highlight one recent game from the SEC, the Big Ten, and the ACC. So starting with the SEC, we saw an upset this past Monday. Number 8, Kentucky, lost on the road to Ole Miss by a score of 66-57. And honestly, I wasn't all that surprised at the loss here because we talk about Ole Miss a ton and their defensive presence and what they bring, and they absolutely lock people down. And Kentucky just didn't have enough oomph on the offensive end, and I thought it was very obvious. So I will say that Kentucky's Key had a double-double with 18 points and 10 rebounds. She played great. She's capable of doing so much for Kentucky. She stepped back, hit a three-pointer, and she's really their strong forward out there. So was a great game for her. But again, Kentucky falls short to Ole Miss here. Madison Scott scored 22 points and really led Mississippi. They rallied from an 8-point second half deficit to get this one done. Also worth highlighting on this one is Clara Strack broke the Kentucky school record for blocked shots in a game with 8 blocked shots. 8.
That's crazy. That's
insane.
Nuts.
Yeah. So kudos to her because that's some major shot blocking right there. I think this one's interesting, and we're going to talk about it in the second half here, where Kentucky's stacking up, and they're ranked 8th coming into this week. What does this loss do for them? They're a top 10 team heading into this game, and they lose like this to Ole Miss, who is probably an average team, Ole Miss, right? Sometimes they're in like that back half to bottom half of the top 25, but really they're not near the top 10 caliber, except for when they play like they did on Monday night. So they're capable of it. What happens here to Kentucky? To me, they're gonna drop out of the top 10 probably when we see the next rankings come out. But that's a tough loss for them when you talk about seeds for the tournament. That's one that I think the committee will look at and just highlight as a negative for Kentucky. So that one's going to be interesting to really look at. The final games for Kentucky here, they have to play number 3, Texas, number 5, LSU, number 15, Tennessee, And then they have to turn around and play number 4, South Carolina. Unbelievable what the back half, the ending of their season for the regular conference season is going to look like here. They've got some really tough opponents that they've got to really bounce back and win a couple of those, if you ask me, to put themselves back in the top 10.
You know what's crazy is I was just looking at Ole Miss's schedule for the rest of the conference. They also haven't played Tennessee, South Carolina, or LSU. And they're already sitting at 7 losses right now. So if they don't win those, right, they're going to be, a 16 or 17, 18, and 10 possibly. So does that loss really hurt Kentucky more or less, because they're probably going to lose out to both teams? That's my prediction, right? I just think those teams are like the powerhouse right now. And Kentucky for us has always been the ebbs and flows, right? They have some great games. They shock us, and it's like, wow, what a great win for them, a upset, and then they fall to Ole Miss, who again, Ole Miss is no team to play with. They have the length, they have the talent, they fight, they grit it out. Coach Yo always gets that team playing. They play amazing defense. I just think both teams struggle offensively. Like, that is what I think a lot of teams, shockingly, this year have an issue with. I find that with Duke sometimes. I find that with North Carolina. So it's definitely, they don't have a Hannah Hidalgo. Not many people do, let me just say that. But a Paige Beckers. These are the teams that, you look at Georgia Amore, and she's had 43 points in one game, but that was really her that's what I don't want to, it's not putting pressure on her, but that was the expectation I had of her at Kentucky the whole time. And maybe that's not fair to have done or had those expectations. It's just, I know that's her style from Virginia Tech. So I just expected it kind of all season. But change of school, change of pace, change of teams, I get all of that adds up without a doubt. Look at Lucy Olson at Iowa, right? A lot of change for her, where she's not in her sweet spot at Villanova anymore, where she's in a comfortable offense, knows what the expectations are. It's just a shakeup, so it's an adjustment. But Ole Miss is a legit team. I think if they get a lower seed in the tournament, I put them on an upset watch without a doubt. I just think they have that potential, and that the losses that they've had this season and then how they're going to finish season out will absolutely be interesting. And for Kentucky, it's the same thing, because they play those top teams that are just tough. They're tough. It's going to be hard.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. If I look, and I looked at the top 25 rankings, and we're going to talk about them again here in the second half. When I saw Kentucky was number 8, I was like, oh my gosh, that's probably the most overrated one I've seen on there.
Yeah, definitely.
And so,
definitely,
again, wasn't all that surprised when they lost. It's their depth, and you're hitting it dead on. Like, the scoring capability for both teams, a struggle. But for Kentucky, they played 7 total players, and they only had 2 points off the bench.
We talk about bench points all the time. 2 and only playing 7, that's rough.
Yeah. And Amelia Hassett, she's a starting forward for them. And usually she brings much better numbers than this. She plays 29 minutes in the game. She had 0 points and 5 rebounds. You just need to produce more. You're playing 29 minutes in a game. You've got to be good for some free throws or some offensive rebound putbacks, something where you're contributing more. And I thought that really hurt them too. And kudos to Ole Miss's defense, because they really choked the guards on the wings. It was very clear part of what they were going to try to do on the defensive end. And Amore was attacking too deep, couldn't turn around and kick it out to her wings because they were absolutely smothered, denied all over the floor. So Ole Miss did a really good job of absolutely taking Kentucky's guards out of it. They kind of let Amore try to distribute like she likes to distribute, but there was nobody really to distribute to on the perimeter, because those wings were just smothered all over the court, locked up. Like, it was a really good game plan, I thought, heading into this game. And we talked so much about Coach Yo, how much we love her. At the end of the game, she takes her sweatshirt off, and she's got a black shirt on, and it says in white print, defense. And I loved it. I just thought that was like such a good flair on the game, because they absolutely locked down Kentucky and didn't let them do anything. So it was a fun game to watch. It was one of those highlighted games on ESPN that happened on Monday nights. So a good matchup overall, fun game to watch overall. But really, Kentucky got got it handed to them there on the road. All right, let's jump into the next game. We're going to talk Big Ten basketball. And this one is a bit of an in-state rivalry. So Michigan versus Michigan State. Michigan State coming into this one was ranked 20. Michigan not ranked, but again, one of those teams that's teeter-tottered in and out of the top 25. And this one's a good rivalry game. They kind of like to beat each other up within seasons, especially since they play each other twice. Michigan State won the first matchup 88-58 by 30 points. They absolutely smoked Michigan. And then a couple weeks later, Michigan comes back and wins it 71-61. So it just shows how these two teams go at each other. They show no mercy. And it was fun to see Michigan come back and knock MSU off there. We talked a lot about Silas Ward. She had 19 in the game. Olsen had 14. Holloway had 10. All three of those girls are freshmen for Michigan.
Wow, that's pretty terrifying. All three freshmen to be dominating so early in their career and making a real impact for the program. Look out for them for the next 3 years.
Yeah, and I hope they stay. We talk a lot about the transfer portal. If those three stay together and they continue to add talent like that, Michigan is going to be a really good team. The fact that they were able to come back and beat Michigan State like that, kudos to them, because I do think they're getting a little bit better down the stretch here. And shout out to Kim Barnes-Rico. I don't think she gets enough hype. She's the winningest coach in the history of the University of Michigan women's basketball program. I just think she's doing some really good things. She's bringing in those recruits. The third game we want to highlight here is from the ACC. Yours truly, Becca, Notre Dame, number 3 at the time, now ranked number 2, versus Cal, who was 21 at the time, now not ranked because Notre Dame absolutely spanked them. I mean, it wasn't even a contest. If anyone watched that game, Notre Dame just absolutely owned them. They win that one 91-52. So I have to ask you, Becca, Notre Dame has straight up dominated the ACC. They have 3 really tough games coming up down the stretch here. They've got Duke, number 13. They play them Monday. They've got NC State, ranked number 10. They play them Sunday, February 23rd. And they've got Florida State, ranked 23rd. They play them Thursday, February 27th. As a former Notre Dame player, put yourself back in their shoes. You're getting towards the end-ish of conference play here. How important is it that Notre Dame takes care of business in these 3 games, especially because they're worthy opponents coming up here?
It's absolutely take care of business, stay the course, wrap this up. It's stay aggressive. I was really glad to see them come out so fiery, so intense against Cal, who was 21 at the time, just because those teams that are ranked on the lower end of the 25, you just never know. It's for them, it's a free for all. They don't have to worry about getting a loss. It's almost expected at that point. So for Cal to come in and Notre Dame to really just dominate and do the job that they needed to do, it was great to see. And I hope they continue that. Duke being a 13 and NC State being, 13 and 10 seeds make me a little more nervous, right? Those are 2 teams who, again, have been up and down this season with their scoring potential and their defensive intensity. I think Notre Dame is going to stick to Notre Dame, try to run them off the floor and just out rebound them and run. But again, it is absolutely, if you're Notre Dame right now, it's clean this up, knock out these next couple games, get some wins, make sure you get a good seed/bye for conference, and then win out conference so that you get and keep probably and hopefully a number 1 seed for the NCAA tournament, period. That is the mission. Everything else is a distraction. So a hiccup within these last couple games would really set him back, I think.
And we've watched all 3 of these teams play at some point throughout the season, some of them a couple times here. To you, which one makes you most nervous? Because Duke brings the defensive presence. Florida State, they bring a ton of offense. They have one of the highest performing offensive players who can go off for 40 points if she wants to. Might be hard against Notre Dame, but she's capable of it. So Florida State's bringing that offensive end of it. NC State brings some of the experience. Played in the Final Four last year, knows what it takes to play in some of these big games. Have they lost some of them this year? Yeah, but they've played a lot of tough opponents. So which of the 3 makes you the most nervous?
I'm going to go with NC State. I think their experience, and they've had some injuries early, but they seem to kind of just be on a flow. They just had an upset not even, a week or 2 ago where it was kind of shocking to everyone, right? Like, oh, wow, NC State got that win. Like, great to see. They've also lost to Cal, so you never really know where and what team is going to come out, which is why I think they're dangerous. Duke, as you mentioned, bring in defense. So now we got to have an IQ to score within that defense. Make them switch defenses. Know our offense, what we're going to run against. Florida State having, we know they have a high score over there. All we got to do is try to lock her up, contain her, or outscore her. That worst case, right? Outscore her. If she goes off for 30 or 50, that'd be terrible, but just outscore her. NC State, it makes me nervous just because they can roll on the defensive end, and if they get hot on the offensive end, then that's a competition. That's a game where Notre Dame has to show up on both sides of the floor.
Yeah, I totally agree. Duke, for me, we talk about their defense a ton. Are they going to be able to play the best defensive game of the season for them? No, because Notre Dame's guards are so good. It's going to be a matter of Reagan Richardson, Toby Fournier, those girls that are capable of scoring. They absolutely have to show up in this game, or they're going to lose like Cal did. They will lose by 40 if they don't. Yeah. So that one's going to be interesting. It could go one way or the other, and that's kind of the flip-floppiness that we've seen from Duke all year. So if they don't bring it, Duke's going to get embarrassed.
And NC State just upset Duke. So that was the game that I was trying to think about earlier this month. So again, these teams towards the end of the season, the end of conference, it's doable for Notre Dame. It should be, punching in the clock, going to work, taking care of business, but you just don't know. And it's the same thing with when you look at the SEC, where you have like a whole bunch of teams playing the LSUs, Tennessees, and South Carolinas. You're kind of determining your own fate here. So
yeah, one game at a time, right? Just like the tournament.
Yeah,
kind of approach it that way. And I think Notre Dame will be just fine.
Definitely. All right, let's jump into our second half. This is our rank and file. So we're going to talk about the AP poll, some shakeups, and then we're just going to dig in a bit more of overall conversation around the player of the year race and how these shakeups impact that. First off, we still have UCLA undefeated, riding the number 1 spot. Rightfully so, showing up, taking care of business. It seems to be as if they're unstoppable right now. And number 2 moving up is Notre Dame. They're 21-2. Their 2 losses were at that darn tournament to TCU and Utah. So again, for them, we kind of highlighted them just a little bit ago. Need to take care of business and close it out. Texas 24-2. They lost to Notre Dame and South Carolina. South Carolina 22-2, lost to UCLA and Texas. So what do you see of in that top 4 ranks right now? Everybody's kind of losing to everybody except UCLA and Notre Dame. Obviously, different conferences, but they've played across conference before, right? Non-conference battles. So you have Texas, who's lost to Notre Dame and South Carolina. South Carolina, who's lost to UCLA and Texas. UCLA, who's not lost to anybody. And then Notre Dame, who's upset Texas and, UConn even, and USC. So it's the top 4. Interestingly enough, UCLA obviously has no losses whatsoever. But then you have your 2, 3, and 4 all with 2 losses and kind of merging and losing to one another. So I just find that interesting that that's the caliber of women's basketball right now. And what a great thing that the non-conference or they're in conference and they're playing each other so much. A lot of times you don't really get that as, a UConn where they're just riding in the Big East, don't really have a ton of competition, but they're scheduling those non-conference games against a USC. Definitely just very interesting. Jumping back to the rankings, number 5, we have LSU. They have 1 loss, which is to South Carolina. Number 6, we have USC. Again, they have 2 losses to Notre Dame and then that upset on the road at Iowa. Number 7 is UConn. They have 3 losses currently. They lost to Notre Dame, USC, and Tennessee. Number 8, Kentucky, which again, it's interesting to see Kentucky. I know we've talked about how high they are in this, but again, they only have 2 losses, but they're heading into a very tough part of their season coming up, as we mentioned, with the Tennessee, South Carolina, and Texas. So the SEC is absolutely packed this year. I think they're going to get a ton of schools that get conference bids, get bids to the tournament, but obviously no one can be as dominant and just run the train and win it all, right? So definitely interesting to see that. Number 9, Ohio State. They have 3 losses to Penn State, UCLA, and USC. And then rounding out the top 10, number 10 is NC State. They've lost to South Carolina, TCU, LSU, and Cal. Interesting there. I can't tell you how many times I've said lost to South Carolina. Did you notice that?
I noticed that, and a lot of these teams have lost to Notre Dame too.
Yeah, you know what would be awesome is I would like a little preview Notre Dame, South Carolina. Obviously, we're not going to get that, but man, that would be good. And honestly, we might see that in the tournament. But again, just super interesting to see kind of the dominant powerhouses in women's basketball.
Yeah, for sure. And how some of those teams have remained and some of them have, shuffled in. Back when we played, LSU was still making Final Fours.
Mm-hmm.
And they're making them today. Notre Dame was making Final Fours. They're making them today. South Carolina's come on more recently since Dawn really has hit her stride. It's cool to see, even though we played against UConn, it's cool to see a UConn still in the top 10 and Gino is consistently able to bring it back. I think it's good for the game because it's fun when teams like Notre Dame and Tennessee beat them. So it's just fun that they're still out there and it means something when you beat them. So I think it's really exciting. And if you continue down the list, it's really a drop off to me. You get to like teams 7, 8, 9, and it could be anyone in those slots on a given week of this top 25. To your point, it's like really these powerhouses that are probably going to win out in the tournament. We're probably going to see in the Final Four. One of these top 5, 6, maybe UConn, throw them in there, 7 teams, probably will make the Final Four. Might be an upset or two, which is great. I hope there is because it's more fun. And then we'll see it carry through into the national championship game. And it's fun for the game. I wish there were a couple more Cinderella stories, and maybe we'll have that this year. I also look at it and like I see Tennessee is ranked 15th now. We were able to knock off UConn last week, turn around and lost a tough one to LSU, who's a really good team this year. Oklahoma's at 16. When I look at that, and how tough the SEC has been. In front of them, they have TCU, North Carolina, Duke, and Kansas State. And I'm 100% biased on this comment. But I think Tennessee and Oklahoma are better teams than a Kansas State. A Duke, most of the time, like Duke is capable of it. North Carolina, most of the time. Like I would love to see some of those matchups throughout the year also. And kudos to the teams that are actually scheduling these tough games. Notre Dame went to work on their schedule. The teams that they played this year, non-conference, amazing for our game. And they took care of business, right? Like, so I love to see those top team matchups, but I would love to see more of the middle of the pack, bottom half of the top 25 also schedule some of these tough games. Ohio State shies away from it. I mean, who did they play out of conference that was worth anything? LSU didn't even play anybody out of conference that was worth. They could have went out and scheduled a UConn or a Notre Dame, or they didn't either. And that's a team we've talked about heading into conference play. How is LSU going to stack up? And they've held their own. That one's been an interesting one too.
Do you think, obviously, when you recruit players, you know who's coming in, who's coming out, and who you have to replace, right? Like when I was there, I already knew Kat Wesbeld was on the board behind me to replace me. That's just how it goes. Do you think these coaches also look at scheduling that way? Because I say that LSU was a powerhouse last year. Angel Reese, Haley Van Lith, Morrow, they had the stars to make any game competitive and win. This year, you see I just don't remember them having such a easy start to the season as they did this year. So maybe it was because she knew Angel Reese was going to be gone. Who knew where they would be with Haley Van Lith? Because she left. She just left.
Right.
So maybe being on the younger side, they saw that and knew like, hey, let's have an easier preseason. Let's not weigh it up. Where like Notre Dame, they knew Hannah would be back. They knew Liv would be back. And at the end, honestly, like not having Maddie and some injuries that popped up, that was not planned, obviously. But they scheduled those games to make it competitive early. I mean, we're talking end of November, early December. That's super early in conference or in the season in general. So I just wonder if that's also goes into the planning.
Right. And Tennessee did something similar, bringing in Kim Caldwell and the shakeup on that team. The non-conference schedule was, I don't want to say it was a joke. I'm not trying to knock other teams. It's just they didn't have a tough non-conference either.
Yeah.
And part of it is their conference is so tough.
Right.
Right. You have to kind of hedge that bet also in the SEC
For
right
sure.
now. So maybe that's part of it. I think it's a really good point. And we have seen Flage, Morrow, some of those girls really step up for LSU,
Yep.
where they're not as deep though as they were last year. So I think it's a really good point.
So speaking of some matchups, let's highlight a couple for Sunday and Monday because there's some good ones. Sid and I were talking about this and we were like, oh man, these are going to be some games all Sunday. Don't talk to me. So Sunday we have UConn versus South Carolina at 1 p.m. Eastern. We also have NC State versus North Carolina at 2 p.m. Eastern. LSU versus Texas at 3 p.m. Eastern, and then Michigan State versus UCLA at 9 p.m. Eastern. Now, that's just Sunday. So let's talk about a couple there. Let's go Let's go from the bottom up, right? Michigan State versus UCLA, that could be an easy game for UCLA, right? They should get another win. But again, it is at UCLA, so that's why I'm stating all this. Michigan State, though, they seem to kind of they go up and down with how they're playing versus who they're playing, right? So we just saw they beat Michigan by 30 and then they end up losing a couple weeks later to them. Then who knows how UCLA is going to play against Michigan State? It's just a new opponent. They're new to the conference. We could see a upset like Iowa did to USC. What do you think, Sid?
Yeah, I think Michigan State goes and lives by their guards, and I think they have a huge matchup problem with Betts. So it comes down to Lauren Betts. If she shows up like she does most games, I think Michigan State is absolutely going to get murdered in the paint. Like I just don't even know how they match up to Lauren Betts. That's the Kiki Rice. Valid. She could be shut down. She's scored 13 points and 10 points and like lower point totals, but Lauren Betts is. There's not a matchup in the country who can really stop Lauren Betts if she's playing her game.
For sure.
That's why she's up for Player of the Year. We're going to talk about that in a second here, but that's where I think Michigan State's going to struggle. Are they capable of winning? Sure. I mean, UCLA hasn't lost yet. Maybe it's okay if UCLA loses one of these. Maybe they learn a lot from it and they're stronger come tournament time.
They have been super turnover prone. So, but I also with that comes the fact, Coach Corey's like on him to fix it and clean it up. So it definitely, it's a game that UCLA should win. I'm just saying it would be an interesting one to have Michigan State give them a little fight.
Yeah, Michigan State, they'll come out in their press for sure. And if they can get them to turn the ball over and keep it out of Lauren's hands, they got a shot.
Yeah. All right, let's jump to the other two games that are pretty big. I just wanted to get Sid's input on, right? UConn versus South Carolina and LSU versus Texas. High level, what are you thinking on these?
I think Paige needs to come out and absolutely dominate one of these games. That's going to be huge for her. There's been a lot of talk lately. I don't think she showed up like she wanted to in the Tennessee game. I don't think she showed up maybe even like she wanted to in the USC game. They always want more out of her, right? They're going to go as Paige goes. And they've got AZ Fudd and Sarah Strong and other really good players also. But Paige is that senior for them that brings a ton of experience, and she's one of the best guards in the country. If Paige Becker shows up, UConn has a shot. If she doesn't, South Carolina, we talk about this on every episode, is so deep that they will wear UConn down. Because to me, UConn is not that deep. Gino will play 7-8 players, doesn't look to his bench a ton. He's a little bit more on the old school side in that regard, whereas Dawn plays pretty much everybody, right? So I think that's where UConn is a little bit outmatched, is on the depth side of it. But if Paige and AZ Fudd and Sarah Strong come out and play their games, it should be a barn burner down the stretch.
Awesome. Let's jump to the LSU versus Texas one. I know, just high level, that I think this is going to be a pretty decent matchup here. We have Oldacre inside for Texas. She's going to battle. I hope she stays out of foul trouble and just cleans up on the boards. You have Booker. I mean, like, Texas is coming into this LSU game. That's going to be a good matchup. And I honestly think LSU has a lot to prove in this game because they are so evenly matched up. And now we see them being ranked high. They're moving up. Both Texas and LSU are within the top 5. I think it's just an important game. If LSU needs to have a statement win, I think this is the game.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think this one's got to be circled on their calendar as one that they absolutely have to try to win out here if they want to get a good seed. And Texas is riding that high after beating South Carolina. They got that confidence boost there, so they got to try to come out. And LSU, to me, LSU has to play a full 40-minute game. We've seen early in the season where they maybe take a quarter off or a half off, and they're tight with some of these teams that shouldn't even be hanging with them. They can't mess around with Texas. Because to your point, Booker is so good. Her mid-range game is unreal. If she's on, she's capable of going off for 30 points. Oldacre is solid down low for them. You mentioned her also. Like, LSU's going to have to bring it for a full 40.
Don't mess with Texas. Last game we wanted to highlight is Monday, is that Notre Dame versus Duke game at 6 p.m. Eastern. So again, we've chatted a lot on that. It's an important game for Notre Dame to just keep taking it game by game and getting wins. So definitely some good matchups for Sunday, Monday, and make sure you check them out because we will.
I think what's interesting to talk about, we talked about the huge shakeup right there in the top 5, top 10 for the AP poll. It begs the question to me, how much do these rankings play into the player of the year rankings? And so I was doing a little research on it, and I think it's interesting. College sports are unique in a way that these rankings not only work, but also affect how the season unfolds for these teams. They aren't categorized by record, but by journalist votes. It's a little different in that regard. Record plays into the way voters decide how to vote, though. So I think that's important. Like, they're taking into consideration how good your team is if you're going to be a contender for this award. So that helps a Hannah Hidalgo. It helps a Lauren Betts because they're 1 and 2 in the country right now. But what about like a Booker? She's maybe we'll see where they land. Texas lands, but if they lose a couple games down the stretch here in the SEC and they get knocked back to the back half of the top 10, does that hurt her even for having a shot? Right. So there's just different conversations like that. It is a delicate balance of taking these rankings as a way to categorize the best teams in the country, but not letting them solely shape your perspective on the college women's basketball landscape as a whole. The rankings also help determine the seeding. And we talked about that a lot also, right? It helps when you enter the season as a high seed and then you can maintain some of that. It's harder to enter the season not being ranked, have to win a whole bunch of games as season goes on to then enter that ranking. We see that in football. We see it across the board with college sports, but also interesting there. Ultimately, the player of the year is another vote-based award, so these rankings end up playing a part in those decisions as well. The rankings have seen quite a shakeup this week, and that's because of the shakeup in the top 25, like we were mentioning. And this season has been way less predictable than seasons in the past.
That is true.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, South Carolina won every game last year, and I don't think a ton of people were surprised. Like, I will actually be surprised if UCLA wins every game. That will be a shock to women's basketball. The fact that they've done it to this point is great, but they have the whole back half of the season, really, I think, because you've got the rest of the conference, you've got conference play, and then you have the actual tournament. And to keep winning through all of that is a really tough putt for a team like UCLA, I think. So that'll be interesting. So the top names in the race right now include Hannah Hidalgo, Notre Dame, Juju Watkins from USC, and Lauren Betts. So I think those 3 to me are pretty much dead on right now. I think it's a toss-up between the 3 of them. We've talked about how Lauren Betts maybe has a little bit of an edge right now because of what she's been able to do down low for UCLA and the fact that they're undefeated. That matters right now. We'll see how UCLA, if they're able to stay undefeated, though, I think that's going to be a big thing here. If Notre Dame keeps winning out, that's going to be great for Hannah. So it's just an interesting balance there. Whereas I think Watkins for sure has the impressive numbers, but the Trojans have things to figure out still, right? They're sitting at number 6 and they've just kind of been up and down. They got upset by Iowa recently, which was, I think, a huge blow to this, or Watkins, which it kind of stinks, but you know, we could have seen her pick it up a little bit more. I think she could have stepped up even more, right? Even though she's one of the best players to ever play the game. It's crazy for me to say this. She would smoke me in a game of 1-on-1. But like, if she's going to be that top player of the year, is she capable of putting the team on her back, almost like a quarterback in a football game, and leading them and getting through the tough possessions and getting through those tough runs and coming out and getting the victory? She didn't do it against Iowa, right? So I think that it matters.
I find it interesting that Juju is amazing. She she is an amazing player. She can create. One-on-one, I'd pick her over anybody. The interesting thing is we've said early on that her and Kiki need to get rolling. They need to gel. And I just don't feel like that's happened as much as it could have yet. Right? I even think Booker and Oldacre might have better chemistry when it comes to their roles and what they need to do for their team to be successful. I just think Juju and Kiki are almost like fighting, not in a sense of it's visible and you see it. It's just I just feel like they're so capable of so much more individually that if they did that together, it would be the perfect puzzle. Because remember, we've also mentioned there needs to be a three guard, a 2-3 guard that comes in and is consistent. And Howell comes in and she brings that. And she wasn't one that was starting early on in the season. She's kind of taken on that role. But I just think in general, USC depends on Juju so much instead of just letting her play and like they're creating within how she plays. Like Hannah. Hannah is very much, and again, they're different styles, right? Hannah is a point guard, but I just think Juju is very like they're watching her almost play one-on-one at times instead of creating while people are looking to double, triple team her to move that back door to get a dump down. So there's just things that I think USC is still trying to figure out for sure. And it would help Juju with her numbers and in the long run, the overall, who knows, these awards, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's at the beginning there, a good point. Like she is amazing. She's one of those
Yeah.
like generational players almost. So
Yep.
to sum it up, when the voters are voting, some really take rankings and records into account when choosing their pick. Others look solely at the statistics and nothing else. So it's a mixed bag here of how this is voted on. Others will balance the two. So looking both at the ranking and the individual stats, but also team performance. So just an interesting take because I've never really looked into how player of the year voting takes place and what all goes into it and what's factored in. So at the end of the day, there are no specific criteria when it comes down to who deserves the award the most. But I will say last year, hands down, Caitlin Clark was winning that thing. It's fun this year that we don't really know who that award's going to go to. I think there are these top three we're talking about. And if any of these top three get it, people are going to go, yeah, I think she deserves it. Right. And people will make arguments for the other two, but all three of these players are just phenomenal players.
Absolutely. All right. Let's jump into our last segment here. We have our overtime, our Unrivaled update. So if you all remember how awesome the Unrivaled League is, it's a brand new league. It's something that Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart put together, got all these amazing resources. There's a beauty lab, there's nannies on staff. It's absolutely awesome. And it's been rocking and rolling. So if you we even picked teams that we thought would do really well and win it. And Sid and I both picked the Mist to win. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Mist are dead last. Absolutely dead last, sitting in the 6th seed with a record of 2-6.
We look like fools. We're trying to have a women's basketball podcast if we can't even pick the dead last team.
This is a new league. We're trying to get our feet wet. We're trying to understand. And honestly, I just don't think the Mist are gelling. They have a ton of talent on that team. Stewie has been off. Honestly, like her shots have not been falling. I think she's even slightly frustrated on that front. But they have all the pieces. It's not working, right? And there's only 3 of them that can play on the court at the same time. So you got to pick the best ones out there. And so they've been rotating quite a bit. I will also mention a lot of these teams are dealing with injuries. There has been numerous injuries to the not anything extreme, thank goodness, but just they have to go get a relief contract and bring in a player that wasn't a part of the original 36. So in the 5th seed, you have the Phantom team. In the 4th, you have Vinyl. The 3rd seed right now is Rose. 2nd is Laces. And number 1 is the Lunar Owls. And guys, they're not just winning. They are dominating. They are 8-0. The 2nd seed, Laces, they have won 4 games. Won 4, lost 2. So these Lunar Owls are dominating. Nafisa Collier's on this team. Courtney Williams is on this team. Skylar Diggins is on this team, and they are rolling. And you can, if you were just to compare the Mist and the Lunar Owls, it's like night and day. I mean, it truly is. There's great guards on both sides. There's great post players. It's just the Lunar Owls are clicking and they are rocking it. They even like hoot and stuff after they win. Who they do all this thing. So it's absolutely beyond entertaining and just a great league in general.
I think we might have to name this episode Chemistry because to me, like,
yeah.
If I look, and we did this, right? We looked at the teams and the players that were going to be on each team before this started. And to me, I was like, wow, I think the Mist are the most talented. Boom, I'm putting them at number 1. But they just aren't really, there's not the chemistry there. But the Lunar Owls, they bring it. Like they're playing well together and chemistry.
Absolutely. So one piece that I wanted to add is within the league itself, they have a one-on-one tournament. And they have rankings, they have it all is matched up. And in the beginning, they had the first day was Monday, the 10th, and they had 8 matchups. A lot of those, right, all players were ranked and put in a bracket, but due to injury or a bye or people just not able to compete, they dropped out. So those people, obviously, who they were going against, moved on. No big deal, just part of the bracket, keep it moving. These games, it's first to 11 points or the highest point, whoever's winning within 10 minutes. It's also a 7-second shot clock. So the second you get the ball, you have 7 seconds to make and take a move and create something and get a bucket. It is the most fast-paced one-on-one I've ever seen. So much so that it's pretty obvious and evident, like it's exhausting. I could not do this. I'm watching them. I'm like, oh my gosh, no way, no how, not happening. But it's also there. I mean, there's different nuances to it. You have some passers. You have 2 individuals that are out on the 3-point line. You can pass to, get it back, have to run it back past the 3-point line. It's make it, take it. It's intense, Sid. We could not do this. This is something I feel like our AAU program would do, though. But I'm just really glad he didn't think about this and we didn't have to, because it would have been a war. But to see these women at the highest skill playing one-on-one it's pretty crazy. It's stuff you only see behind the scenes in a gym, and to see it live and to see it for money, it's an all-out competition. They had, like I said, 8 matches on the Monday the 10th, 12 matches Tuesday the 11th, and now they are in the final 4. So these women will play Friday the 14th today. Games start at 7:30 Eastern. Now, I just want to highlight the top 4 girls. You have 3 UConn players and 1 Notre Dame player. You have the 3 UConn players are all versatile post players. You have the 1 Notre Damer who is from the guard U. How it will match up, Azare Stevens will play Nafisa Collier, and then Arike Gumbawale will play Aaliyah Edwards. And whoever wins those 2 games will play each other immediately following, or the semifinal, the quarterfinal person, the runner-up, they'll go next. But this is for money. These women are going at it. And it was actually like, I was on pins and needles watching Skylar had to play Arike, 2 Notre Damers. And no joke, I was nervous because these women are beyond competitive. They are the ultimate. This is peak performance for money. We get to see them check up, play one-on-one, and it was intense. It was absolutely intense. It delivered. It was awesome to see and just super competitive.
Yeah, I think what's super fun is your game is on a spotlight, right? You're playing one-on-one, so either you're going to play good defense or you're going to get ran out the gym. And then on the flip side, offensively, if your shot's not falling and things aren't just really jiving for you and it's tough to score because they're locking you down, like both sides of the ball, you really have to play really well in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And back to your point about the pace and the 7 seconds and how fast the game is, I absolutely love this player. Loved her at South Carolina. Love her on the Indiana Fever. Aaliyah Boston was gassed.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was like super interesting to see. This is a different type of conditioning almost, how fast paced it is. And it was interesting to see some of that. I mean, she was winning at one point in her matchup, but then Copper just worked her and had more in the tank. I mean, it really came down to that for me in that matchup. But interesting to see how they're all responding to this and playing playground style checkup 1v1. It's pretty cool.
Last point, I just want to make a plug for all the girls who are working on their skill set and maybe they're being told you're a post player and you think in your mind you're only going to be in the post and you can't dribble and you can't do anything because the dominant person in each one of these, like when there was a guard versus post matchup, the post player won. And it wasn't because they were, faster, stronger. Azure Stevens is a pretty thin post player, right? But the versatility these women have as being a post player, but you're checking up at the top of the key. You're having to handle the pressure and the body and the bang and going in to get your move. And these guards are outrunning you, right? Like Shakira Austin beat Chelsea Gray. I mean, these upsets happen because Rakita Jackson beat Jackie Young. Like there were just so many good matchups that I think when you look at it, having Arike Gumbawale really being the only true guard there, I think is extremely interesting. And I think it says a lot about overall skill set, versatility, and how far that can get you.
We talk about that a ton.
A
Especially if you've got young AAU players or daughters out there who say, oh, I'm not a post player, I'm a guard. Post game is where it's at. If you can extend and knock down the three ball and still handle the ball, like a solid 4 or 5 that can do those things right now is highly recruitable at the next level. Highly.
At that point, somebody who can do that as a 4 or 5 in high school might actually be a 3 or 4 in college, right? And
Right.
then they're working with you in the gym, shooting and pulling threes. So again, I was a post, but I kind of did a 1 through 5 in high school, right? We just pick up where you can. I was recruited as a guard, went to a post, then I was a wing, then I went back in the post. So versatility keeps you on the floor, and any way you can get out there and play and help your team, I say do it. Create that skill set, sharpen those tools, get better, and get out there.
Who you got winning this thing tonight?
Oh, you know what? I'm gonna roll with Nafisa Collier. I just think she is the real deal. She is so good. I don't get me wrong. I remember her at UConn, but to see her progression from UConn to the Minnesota Lynx and the amount of points and I mean, she's just dominant. Period. Flat out. She dominates the game.
It would be cool if she won. Being a co-founder of the league, that would be pretty cool for her.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think I'm going to Enrique. I'm pulling for the guards over here.
And that's fair. She would have been my 2 just because she's a bucket, man. She's gonna be it's gonna be rough. What if the final is Nafisa versus Enrique? I'm gonna be happy either way.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. Ooh, that's the matchup I want also, for sure. All right, let's wrap up today's podcast. So we came at you with 2 different halves. The first half was that 28.5 conference call where we went around the horn, highlighted 3 good matchups, one from the SEC, one from the Big Ten, and one from the ACC. Second half, Becca really led us there. We walked through the top 25 and a lot of those shakeups that happened in the most recent poll, as well as discussing some of the matchups that are going to be coming at us on Sunday and Monday, as well as the Player of the Year rankings and how that AP poll actually does play a factor in the Player of the Year. And our overtime, the Unrivaled update, and how the league standings are shaping out, as well as that one-on-one tournament that's currently going on.
Will absolutely be a good night of basketball and a good weekend. So tune in, folks, and tune in to us next week where we'll have it all wrapped up for you.
One last thing we did want to highlight is we have a Printify store out there. So we're going to put the link out on our social media profiles. And it's just a simple Printify pop-up. If you want to get on there, buy a shirt, a sweatshirt that's got 28.5 branded stuff on there. We're giving it a shot. See if we got any fans that want to buy some gear and rock the 28.5 logo.
I already got my dad a coffee mug, so he loves it. It's good stuff. Check it out, support, and share the love.
There it is. We'll talk to you all soon. Thanks for tuning and listening in and downloading us. Happy to talk through women's hoops. That's what we do, and it is fun. Talk to you all soon. Talk to you soon, Beck.
See you, Sid. That's the 28.5 final buzzer for today's episode. Don't forget to hit follow and download on your preferred podcast platform to catch every play-by-play. New episodes drop each week throughout the season.
If you've enjoyed our courtside chat, drop us a review or follow us on our social media accounts where you can send us questions that may be selected for our Team Huddle Q&A episodes. And remember, from females who have played the game, the size of the ball matters.